Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive, said author Howard Thurman. Welcome to the second season of the Vulnerable Power Show. Heart to heart, unscripted dialogues with world leaders who are shining examples of the unfolding leadership ascension. Hear from these creative leaders and visionary entrepreneurs who have traversed deep leadership transformations and inner alchemy, actualizing their vision for a better world. We share raw insights and practical tips so you too can transform painful experiences and old energies as fuel for your leadership growth and collective good. Join us and listen in so we can all bring hope, inspire transformation, uplift the world, and show what is possible through heart-centered, vulnerable leadership. As Margaret Mead, anthropologist, once said, "Never believe that a few caring people can't change the world. For indeed, that's all who ever have." Greetings and welcome everybody, and welcome to the second season of the Vulnerable Power Show. If you've never experienced the Vulnerable Power Show, I invite you to go back and see the first season and subscribe to this YouTube channel. It's lower in the videos. What is the Vulnerable Power? If you're new, if you're joining us, it's a deep dive. It's not a show, even if it's called that. It is an immersive experience into the heart of conscious and ascended leaders, global leaders that have gone through the inner alchemy, the transformational process, stepping into their soul's calling. And what is that soul's calling? It's to make a better world. Not that we need to change the world, to raise the collective vibration. As always, we're here to inspire you, encourage you wherever you are in your leadership journey. We're here to show it is possible. At times, it may seem like a leader, you're stuck, you're caught in a rut. It's possible wherever you're at. So I like to start by introducing the guest. Today, it's always a special guest. It's always a special experience. Today, it's even more of a treat, and I'll tell you why. How I met this beautiful soul, Sistar, and I'll tell you what I mean by Sistar in a moment, was through another friend and colleague's net carrying experience. It was a meditation. And I literally said the word tajweed. Now, tajweed, for those of you who are not raised in the Middle East or don't have any experience to the Muslim culture, is the enunciation of the Quran, or their version of the Bible or Torah, if again you don't know anything about Islam, which we'll cover probably today with dear sister Cordelia. And based on that, we connected. And after an initial chat where this beautiful soul had a masquerade shadow mask as part of her, office ambiance. And I asked, do you do shadow work with clients? And if you don't know what shadow work, we're going to probably cover that in today's episode. So on and on I go. And she doesn't know this. For a few months, I went offline early this year, and I got some really deep insights and inspiration after going on this journey. And I got these words, women's empowerment. I really wanted this season to be about wow, man's empowerment. Wow, the rise of this divine feminine energy. A lot of global leaders are feminine in form. And so without further ado, I can go on and on and on about the synchronicities and synergies and overlaps in our convergence. I want everybody to give a very special welcome to Cordelia Gaffar. Cordelia, thank you so much for being here and sharing what you're going to share here today. So giving you the mic, as you know, I like to go with the flow and kind of have an outline of, what was your transformation like? What shaped you? How did you step into who you are now as a leader and what you're sharing with your clients in the world?
Hi, Haas. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'm grateful for our convergence and connection um, and synchronicities throughout the time that our eyes met. Um, this has been part of my transformation. And I'd have to say where it began is through motherhood, which is interesting because I had decided when I was young that I'm going to be a professional. And the youngest of four girls, and they had already had their families. So I didn't really need to do that, right? They had contributed their portion for me. And what I didn't know is in my ignorance, the beautiful thing that motherhood brings. For me, it's brought a understanding of my body,
Mm,
an understanding of um, spirituality and sensuality and human connection and divine connection,
mm,
all of those things. um, you know, if I think back, the
mm.
first part of that was I didn't want to have my first child in a hospital. I didn't, because I didn't want strangers looking in my nether parts, so then
Ah, you wanted a
right?
fig leaf, the proverbial fig leaf, as we call it.
Yes, that's right. And I got what I wanted.
How
I
so?
literally asked God, I'm like, let me have my baby somewhere where with people that love me.
Mm,
And so my first baby was born in my sister's house, and she delivered my baby. I
wow.
didn't even realize how divine that was at the time.
And how spiritually gangster by my millennial vernacular. That's that's a very, pardon my French, ballsy move. I'm gonna give birth, without any of the modern technology, so to speak. Wow.
Yeah. And so, in the end, I had four home births. And what I realized was that I really got into the limbo land between worlds. So
Mm,
just as my baby was coming into this field, right? And
mhm,
into my arms, I always had a pause. There was like a time lapse where I was literally between worlds. And I was like, oh, women are the portal between worlds. That's why in the Quran it says that the 1% of mercy is in the womb of the mother. And, you know, just through connecting with my children deeply, I really got more. I feel that's where the divine
mm,
connection began for me. And as far as even connecting with my body and the real um, purpose of our vessels, right?
mm,
As a mother, you're the food supply, you are the comfort, you are the connection to this world for that child as that spirit is coming into that body. And then just the privilege of watching them grow up and seeing how many years they stay in the divine presence. You ever seen like a 5-year-old just kind of walk around like looking behind them, right? That's because they're not fully here yet.
mm,
They're still in the spirit world,
mhm.
you know?
Hmm. Well, let's
So
unpack some of this real quick because this is good. I like how we flowed into this. And I didn't know that you had, I always learn things about the guests. I may know some of the guests on this show. I always learn new things. So that's part of this. Again, it's an experience because it's unscripted and we're flowing with an outline. So, okay. So, really beautifully said because you covered, without even knowing, I told you a couple days ago that this quote that I love that I think is hadith, technically not part of the actual text, it's parables per se, is there's this saying by the Muslim prophet Muhammad, the avatar, I call him an avatar, so to speak. And it's heaven is under the foot of the mother. And so really beautifully, again, converging with that point, because you called it a portal between worlds. I believe that's what that heaven is under the foot of the mother means, that women have this innate sixth sense or this gift, that form, the feminine form has this connection. So that's one thing. So let's get into that. And then real quick, a couple of other things that I wanted to unpack in what you said. Seems like you went into altered consciousness states. So a lot, as you know, what I'm all about is this whole mastering the energy systems and really expanding our consciousness. So let's, maybe give more of that. How did that impact you as well? Impact maybe more of that. And I'll remind you of these things. And then embodiment, it's, what you do, what I do, and we can flow more on how that shaped you later. So I really want to hear about these first two, is your consciousness experience, this whole, because it sounds like a very surreal paranormal experience. And I've heard that from other women that have done natural birth, that it's shamanic in nature, almost, quote unquote. You know, it's this very plant medicine-y, which is going to be the next episode with another soul brother, Essential Light. Also another cancer baby like you, actually, that I forgot to mention. So yeah, so that, talk to us about that conscious experience, and then this divine motherhood, because that's really what we're touching upon. Is some people talk about mother, and I'm talking about a higher level of that, the omega principle. If you study metaphysics, you know, the divine goddess, the divine mother, doesn't mean you're pagan worshiping. It means this energy in the field that's the yin to the yang. So talk to me more about those two, and then we'll flow from there, if that's okay.
Yeah. So, I'm going to say this in layman's terms,
Mhm.
right? So as the baby crowns, I was in lots of pain. Okay. And in order um, to understand that, I actually studied a lot about birth, right? Natural birth and everything. I'm part of the natural birth community. So the labor pains are a conversation, right? Our bodies are already talking to each other. It's a conversation between the mother and the baby, you know? So the contractions are necessary. So I know when to push, because the baby's like, okay, mom, I'm ready to come. So it hurts. I'm gonna be honest, it hurts a lot.
Mhm.
And in order to not feel the pain, one of the things we do in natural birth is to keep the jaw open, because the jaw is connected to your hips.
Nervous system, yeah, polyvagal.
Right. So what I did to keep my jaw open was I said, La ilaha illallah, right?
For those
Um,
that don't know, so that's a Muslim phrase. It's basically like you're asking for God's assistance, if I'm not mistaken. So
right.
go
There's no God but Allah.
ahead.
And or I would say subhanallah, right? Allah is greater, and it's dot 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 literally, because then whatever situation you're in right now. So what happened is I'm continuing to, say subhanallah, subhanallah. And yes, my hips are staying open.
Mhm.
The pain goes away, but then I'm in the divine presence now,
Hmm.
because I'm not feeling the pain. I'm allowing the baby to come
Hmm.
into this world, right? And then I know to just stop and listen.
Hmm.
And the listening is a different kind of listening, right? It's like to the
Hmm.
to the universe, right? And then the push and the baby comes out, right?
Hmm.
So that was my altered state. It doesn't end,
Hmm.
right? Other women who are not Muslim may experience this as an orgasm, right? So when you have an orgasm, it's like you're like in that limbo land, and it may be 2-3 minutes, or it may feel like 15 minutes and it may be 30 seconds, but I don't really know how long it happened. But in that orgasmic pause, right?
I love that. Oof.
Then I look down into my baby's eyes, and that's our first hello without words. And the babies, they will stop crying. Well, my babies stop crying because we're already talking, because our souls are connected, right?
I feel it. I got chills. I got chills. They're multiplying. Wow. Well, give me a moment, because that, we'll jump to that later, this notion, because I know, you converted. The irony here is she converted, or I guess you could say the cosmic humor of it, she converted to Islam. I was born in Iran, came here when I was 2.5 to Los Angeles, really consider myself more Americanized, more whitewashed, more dudes and bros. And I was raised in Iran. If you don't know, the culture is Shiite Muslim versus Sunni, and Sunni, I shouldn't say versus, excuse that language, and Sunni. There's two, rehashing. I'm very big with words, but not versus and. And so most 98% of Shiite Muslims are in Iran. It's actually a subsect of Islam, which is more Zoroastrian infused. Now, her and I'm actually wearing the shirt that I usually wear for these episodes, which at the bottom has a saying from Rumi, which is from the town I was actually born in Shiraz, which again, we'll talk about this later in the episode. I want to pause on this point of this orgasmic pause, this divine presencing, because for me, I got the chills and feel what you're describing and emanating. because in this shirt, it says, I am drunk and you are crazy. Now, for the audience, if you have no experience with mysticism, altered states of consciousness, plant medicine, orgasmic pauses from natural births, as Cordelia is really, really beautifully explaining and relaying, that's what these mystics were talking about. It's this wine of the mystic, this crazy, divine crazy. It's losing our minds, finding our senses. So what you're saying is, you said something really beautiful about this altered state. It's this stopping, and you said listening in a different way, which speaks to this communication with the soul connection. Would you say we could colloquialize it to listening with the heart in those states?
Yes.
So explain that. So like how would you explain that from that birthing experience? Like if you were to translate that to leadership, as we continue unpacking your transformational journey, how would you then transpose that? Like, how will this help somebody? Because yeah, okay, I hear you. And then I'm going to play the cynic here and go, well, so what if I'm listening and I'm a man, and I am a man? We'll talk about that as well. The interplay between the masculine and the feminine. Why should I care about this listening with the heart? Why should I care about this pause? Why should I care about being in the divine presence? I want to make money, alpha, go crush it. So how does that translate before we continue to pepper in some
Yeah.
tips?
Imagine yourself speaking to your team, right?
Okay.
And there've been a lot of changes in the organization, and people are complaining. You
Mm-hmm.
have a choice, right?
Mm.
You can hear it as a criticism from other people who don't know anything,
Mm.
or you can open your heart and listen for possible um, policy changes, openings and opportunities for restructuring, reorganization, the gifts or skill set of the person who's speaking, who may be mismatched with their position.
Mm.
That's how that translates.
So it's like the reading between the lines, almost like reading the feel. I call it energetic intelligence. So how does one do that? I know we're multilinear as I am, and I know you can hang like that. What how do we do that? Let's can you go one step further if that's okay? Because I know this stuff. Again, for the sake of the audience, and as I've said, to inspire with tips and tools as well. We want to really equip people. If you're new to this, learn from her experience, my experience, and then how do you translate this into impactful leadership? Let me rephrase that, Cordelia. What gets in the way? Gets in the way from your experience personally and with clients, right? So maybe, and then translating that to your before and after, before you had the kids, maybe from your own experience. How are you not in your heart? I know, women naturally have that intuitive ability. So how would you say that in terms of, okay, how do they switch from not in the heart into the heart, from the mind to the heart, as I call it?
Yeah, they're the same. Your mind and your heart are the same.
Ooh.
And what I mean by that is, what I mean by that is, for example, one of the issues we had,
Mhm.
um, the last corporate position I had, was we had a project that, it was understaffed,
Mm,
right? But we were trying to stay under budget.
mm,
So we were overworking the staff.
mm,
And instead of, um, just telling the customer, well, we actually lowballed our estimate and it needs to go this way,
mm,
we're putting more pressure on the staff,
mm,
which was causing output problems, right? So now it's taking longer to do it, which means they're paying more anyway, and they weren't going to pay the full bill.
mm,
So um, just coming into integrity, right, is what we were really forced to do.
mm,
The project manager was totally on board with, I understand that we have to stay under budget. However, if we want to stay in business,
mm,
we have to be in integrity. So our choices are add 2 more people, charge a little bit more, get in on time,
mm.
or, you know, stress out our staff, lose the contract, and get paid less anyway. I
It's
mean,
interesting. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
but this is a real thing.
Yes, exactly.
because we know that your bottom line is directly affected by the way you treat your staff. So that's what I mean when I say the heart and the mind are the same, because you cannot serve at a higher level. You cannot make more money or be abundant in a scarcity mindset. And the scarcity mindset is sucking the energy out of your staff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love this because you're speaking my lingo, because in the relational alchemist side of what I do, and what I know what you do as well, and how we converge on it, and from I guess you could say complementary, different perspectives, is I always say organizations, businesses don't have systems and process problems, they have people problems in relation to those, and you're illustrating it very perfectly. Again, I love this show because it happens very synchronistically, or through the divine hand, as they say. And another way, and this soul sister because she's in the conscious movement with us, Oslam, or Brooke. I loved how she presented it one time, with this notion of stated values. And there's many other colleagues that we have that say this stuff: stated values versus actual values. I think you're really speaking to tuning in, really feeling into it, being present in this pause state that, again, unwinding back to your personal experience giving birth and those lessons for you as a leader. So that's interesting. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And that overworking the staff, I couldn't have said it better. It's the vampiric nature. It's human capital is a very poor way of saying it, and that's, I know we share a similar mission, bringing that soul back. Beautiful, beautifully said. So let's unwind that, going back. So there's this notion of the altered consciousness. So beautifully said. So then the divine motherhood, how is that motherhood, if you want to further the transformational journey for us, how has that motherhood further shaped you, or anything else in terms of that transformation?
So I think that you made a great connection there.
Hmm.
My birth story to what happens in in team meetings, right? Um, because it's very clear. It has become very clear to me over the period of time that I've left corporate and chosen, to raise my 6 children and homeschool them. That motherhood is leadership. It's the ultimate leadership. It is, women are the pillars of society on so many levels that are not acknowledged, not received, even by women, that are, it's almost shamed. And at the same time, you know, um, our husbands, our spouses will take just a very poignant, a very good point, or something brilliant that we say to them in the morning at breakfast, take that into the boardroom and cash in, right?
Oh, are you talking about that locker room talk that guys do?
No,
What are
I'm
you talking
talking
about?
about, like, women and men will talk to their wives in the morning, right? You have coffee, have breakfast,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right? Whether or not you both go to work, or maybe she's a stay-at-home mom,
mm-hmm,
and then then he'll, like, go to work,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And maybe in a meeting bring up the point that she made, and then the CEO will be like, that's a great idea, let's do that,
Oh, you
right?
mean literally co-opting the spouse's?
Yes, it happens every single day. And I know that men listening will agree. They'll be like, oh yeah, you know it happens every single day.
What?
Even the CEO himself, probably,
Yeah.
either his wife or his girlfriend, one of the two, but it's a woman who's, so when I say that, motherhood is leadership, seriously, you know from the birth story, from the raising of children, um and then we're the pillars of society, because when we go to work, we're still even though, again, we're not valued as much, we get paid less,
Mm,
we're listened to less. No, we're not listened to less.
mm,
We're listened to, because this happened to me 90% of my career.
mm.
We're listened to, and then some other man will repeat exactly what we said, and it'll be a better idea coming out of his mouth. So
So that's why, again, this is why I wanted to do it this way, because that's why this is a deep dive. If you're joining us for the first time in this season, this is why we go down these proverbial rabbit holes, because as you know, and we've talked about this, teeing this episode up, was the fact that the work that I'm converging on myself, there aren't that many men that have done this inner unification of the masculine and the feminine. And we're not, for those listening, we're not talking about androgenization. We're not talking about gender identity. That's not exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about energetics. We're talking, to be very clear, because there's a lot of that in the world today. We're not talking about anything related to homosexuality, androgenization, or gender identity. That's literally a different concept. That's more physical gender for us, and biological gender. We're speaking to energy, polarities, ladies and gentlemen. Everything is energy. So this is beautiful because, yeah, and I'm glad you liked it. It's inspired, so I connected the two. And you have that unique leadership from the motherhood and having had a corporate background, which is, again, the type of people I love to bring on. Really beautifully said. I mean, this is going to be one of the catchphrases for this episode, is motherhood is the ultimate leadership. And so back to why I said this on this response back to what you're saying at this moment is I was like, somebody needs to, I'm not saying I'm the only one doing it. I feel like this needs to be discussed because the men need to also hear this and own their part as much as the women need to hear it and own their part. Because you illustrated that women equally in the professional community, in the business realm, which we both operate in, unfortunately are also bashing themselves in a weird way. So I get that. So it's like a double whammy. And then wait until later this episode, we talk about ethnicity and then, religious race. And then you add all these whammies that I'm sure you've experienced, which we can also unpack on this journey you've been on. So yeah, I agree with you. I'm saying all this to say, yes, I agree with you, and very well put, because that's what I meant by women's empowerment. So thank you for organically bringing this up. So, okay, so we're portal between worlds. Heaven is under the foot of the mother, or under this whole how birthing children naturally, being a mother, ultimate leadership. This altered state, how it, listening to the heart, how that attunement really helps organizational leadership, how there's lessons to be learned here in terms of heart-centered leadership. Anything else in terms of this motherhood and what it's meant for you, and then how you've now used this in what you're doing before we move to that? Is there anything else
Yeah.
that feels inspired on motherhood? Yeah.
Most importantly, like motherhood, mothers are nurturers. And
Mm,
so my whole foundation of the books that I write, the work that I do with my clients is self-nurturing first and foremost. So you uh, essentially are learning how to mother yourself. And if you want to translate this into the corporate world, you're learning how to serve your company well, right? Your clients, your staff. As a leader, you have to nurture them. If you don't nurture that through communication, right? So it's the inner and the outer. The way you speak to yourself, you're going to speak to other people that way. It's everything we do is a projection. So if you learn how to nurture yourself, right, which you learn how to mother yourself, have self-compassion, self-forgiveness, self-belief, self-trust. And guess what? When you go out into the world, you're going to do the same thing, because it'll be you. You'll embody that and just radiate that.
the being in alignment, integrity, and all those ways of saying it, as I call it, is being that vibration, or Mohandas Gandhi, be the change. Was there ever a time, because I love to get raw, as those that are regulars to the show, is there ever a time that you didn't know how to mother yourself? Because you're speaking to my soul's evolution of learning how to remother myself. It was inner child work. I had to do soul level work, as well as my masculine experience in my romantic life. So what I know, I had to remother myself. I know most of us have to reparent. It's part of this individuation and healing, this trauma epidemic in the world. What was there ever a time for you? And because this may sound weird to people, going, "What? She's a woman. How does she not know how to mother?" Well, my mother, God bless her, was a smothering mother. Was not, so I was around smothering energy. So I had to learn how to balance that energy, and I had all sorts of responses, reactivities, or triggers to that. So from your personal experience, was there, if you feel comfortable, like from your own mother or your upbringing, were you always good at this? I mean, I know from your South Node and more soul level advanced astrology stuff that we've talked about, you have that innate Cancer energy in you. Is there ever a time that you can admit, and if so, how did you remother yourself? Because this may be new to a lot of people. It's more advanced inner work, so to speak, and man, advanced. Yeah.
That's an interesting question. As you've
Well, it
gone
came out,
through
so there you go.
explaining the question, I
Yeah.
was like, I'm gonna joke with him. I'll say, no, man, I was born perfect.
It's not a joke. You and I are ENTJs, base, and Myers-Briggs, so we do think that way. We have that intellectual arrogance. So yes, we were perfect. Show is
And
done. Everybody, we're perfect. You're not. We're out of here. Thanks for joining us.
yeah, so, you know, my mother was a very caring mother, very balanced. My father also was very balanced. So I grew up in an environment where the things that I talk about, it just seemed like, oh, that's the way the whole wide world is.
Mhm.
And then I went to college, and then I moved to DC and start working.
Mm,
And then I had an interesting marriage.
mm,
So I found out apparently like the rest of the world really isn't like that.
mm,
And in order to live in the rest of the world, I had to I did have to learn how to remother myself, so like self-nurturing meant something different than what I was accustomed to, something different than I was raised in. And there was a little piece that I skipped in between working and getting married, was that both my parents died in consecutive years, right? So there was that grief piece of like missing my mother
mm,
going into the rest of my adulthood.
mm,
And so that was a form of learning how to nurture and mother myself.
mm,
So I would have to say there was probably like a good 7 or 8 years of my adulthood, late 20s, early 30s, where I had to really learn this and
mm.
inculcate it for myself. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And to clarify, I love my mother. We all choose the curriculum as that we do. So to clarify, if she ever hears this, I love you, mom. I didn't, she's like, don't ever talk about me on your show. And I'm like, don't talk about the family, and I'm like, I got to clarify that if she ever watches this. I do. I really do. It's more of like, we choose these incarnations. We choose this path. You don't have to believe in incarnation or any of that. When you choose this, I believe in personal responsibility at an ultimate level. So, okay. So you were born perfect and you had to remother yourself in a different way. And I get that. And yes, definitely the loss. And that's a good point too, that you may not have articulated for me to tune into that. That I sense that what you also mean by mothering in this self-care is stopping, because you did mention it earlier, the stop and listen, pausing, as we call it, or I call it, stilling, pausing your energy. Because I ran over my grief, like I've run over my grief many times as a man and been desensitized and been like, oh, everything's great, everything's fine. So is that an aspect of what you mean, to double check? Because I don't want to be a misogynist and say, does that mean being sensitive remothering? Because I think everybody always goes womanhood sensitive, and that's not a direct synonym. So how would you, in a better phraseology than I could perhaps, unpack, am I accurate? Is that what you mean by mothering? This whole being in tune, sensitive with oneself, the self-nurturing? How would you unpack that in terms of the pragmatics?
Being honest with myself about my emotions, right?
Mm,
I call myself the emotions opener
mm,
transformation, right? So um before I would cope poorly, right?
mm,
um I don't have any feelings, that's not happening, I'll go to work.
mm,
Oh, wait, I'm done with work, I'm going to go to the gym. Wait, I'm done with the gym. Wait, I'm going to write. I'm going to always in motion to run away from my emotions, right? And then stopping, feeling, and recognizing and researching, doing a whole lot of research, tasawwuf, and the which comes from Sufism, or well, Sufism comes from tasawwuf, right? And from the scientific perspective, from the physical perspective, studying yoga and different forms of movement, and understanding how to process our emotions. But most importantly, your emotions last like 90 seconds. What a waste of time. Like, how long does it take to get drunk? How long does it take to be in the gym? How many miles do you have to run? And you could just like be with whatever emotion for 90 seconds. In my corporate career, my emotions were usually rage because, I was working with the white devil. So now I'm
I would be so proud of you. No, I'm kidding. I'm teasing.
I know I shouldn't say that.
I'm teasing.
Seriously though, I was dealing with a lot of racism, a lot of misogyny,
Mhm.
and so I was
It's out there.
angry
It's out
often.
there.
Yeah. And rightly so. And I didn't want to feel those emotions. I was like, I need to be professional in the moment. So I would pause and I wouldn't say what I meant to say,
Mhm.
right? And, by the time I took 48 hours to come back and say what I wanted to say, it felt like a missed opportunity, right? And when I realized that I can just, you know, okay, maybe not in this moment right now while I'm angry, but go and take a walk and come back, you know, what am I really angry about? What's really happening here, right? And then the wisdom comes up and then I can speak to that and and not care how it's received.
Mm.
Like genuinely, that's the power of using your emotions. When you don't use your emotions and you just blah, fly off the handle, then it's vomit.
Mhm.
You're not even saying what you mean. You're not even speaking your truth.
I love that. From an energetic perspective, there's so much wisdom, so much multidimensionality there because you hit the nail on the head because I had actually written nurturing when I asked, is there anything else? And then you, again, this beautiful, we're all one. And if we tune in, almost like a telekinetic effect. So you do talk about a couple of things. So one thing is beautifully said and you articulated and demonstrated that for me, from my perspective, energetically speaking, the feminine or the yin or the omega is more of a state of being, as I've learned energetically. And then you step into the 0 point field, to use quantum mechanics, quantum science. And from that, and you said it really brilliantly, if you can go into that nothingness, that stillness, that pause, that divine presencing, it seems like you also said this, things will come up. Inspiration. People think that I gotta do, and then the doing is more of the masculine alpha for the audience's sake. So everybody, especially in our culture in the West, sorry to bash us Americans, it's do, go, 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 go. And I joke on LinkedIn from go, go, go to slow, slow, slow. And that's very difficult for a lot of us because I have ends to meet. I have kids to feed. I get all of that. I know I'm still not, I'm working on building a family. So I get it. There's people have families, have mouths to feed. So I think that we lose sight of the brilliance of what you articulated, that when we step into this state, this self-mothering brings with it the wisdom, the inner wisdom that we can tap into, the regenerative principles, and very beautiful what you do, which we're going to unpack more of this emotional opener. You're using the energy, emotions. You're not frivolously letting them go all over the place. And I think the frivolity, the lack of awareness, which we're both really in the awareness business in a sense, or consciousness business, we talked about it earlier. You're not like sucking from the staff, you're fueling the staff, bringing more of that awareness there. And then even more so, these ecosystems have this energy, and you're speaking to it very brilliantly. If you don't do something, your staff is going to feel it, and they don't have to be empathic or sensitive. They can be normal,
Yeah.
non-extrasensory, and energy will wear on them. And that's the WHO going burnout, toxicity, stress pandemic, so very beautifully put. And I think it explains also, not only the principles that come from this and the leadership impact, what does it mean? So really awesome. Okay, so you've already touched on this, and this is where I was going to take us next because this is one of our original things, the body connection, or what I call embodiment work. And you alluded to it in your experience, and we're still at this peppering in what you do, and we'll unpack it more fully in terms of replenish me and the body work. So we're kind of there now. Talk to me about your experience with the body connection, right? Because you said through this birthing process and what I call talking with our body intelligence, which is how I heard what you were saying. Talk to us about all that, unpack that, because I know that's very much an area of your expertise.
Yeah. I'm looking over here because my book's over here. You almost make me want to read a passage out of my book. It really says it
If it
eloquently.
feels inspired, grab it, girl. We're live. We flow here at the Vulnerable Power Show. We're like Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm. If you don't like it, it's okay. The concept is we flow with an outline. That's all. So go talk to me, sister.
All right. So As the realization of another poor choice hit my body, I began to feel nauseous. I tried to stifle my tears, but they were relentless and began to fall anyway.
Hmm.
With every hot drop, my skin sizzled and my body shook.
Hmm.
As I tried to prevent dry heaving, a full abdominal cramp seized my core,
Wow.
trickled up my shoulders, and wreaked havoc on my nerves, which then went full attack on my hips. I experienced a combination of menstrual cramps, fever, and the flu as tears gushed from my eyes and my mind processed the realization that I had identified yet another person to release from my life.
Whoa.
If we pay attention to our bodies, they tell us something's wrong. It could be the words of a conversation that trigger the physical responses I have described, or a thought. In this case, it was a conversation with a person I considered a friend. I was in absolute shock that someone could be so indifferent, condescending, and oblivious at the same time.
Whoa.
So, yeah, that's in the introduction.
So that's, would you, I mean, from my experience, I would say that's a biosomatic release. That's a purging, to use plant medicine terminology, when you release energies really quickly or in a very intensive way. What was the, unpack that for us? What is the context? Tie the two for those that are new to embodiment principles, mind, body, mind, heart, body. I don't think we say that enough. Mind, heart, body. We leave out the heart. We go mind, body, and we leave out the heart. Mind, heart, body connection, the body intelligence. Unpack, connect now the quote from your book, that beautiful experience with this. Bring it out for
So
us.
for people who are not connected to their bodies, right?
Mhm.
You'll have a hard week, right?
Mhm.
Every day something goes wrong.
Mhm.
And you near the end of the week, you'll start feeling sick, right?
Mhm.
You'll be like hungry and not want to eat.
Mhm.
You'll have this back pain, or maybe you'll be constipated, or maybe you'll want to drink and you can't. And then you go to the doctor and the doctor's like, no, clean bill of health, nothing's wrong with you, right? But
Sounds like,
you are sure, like in this day and age, that you got COVID. And what really happened was, on Monday, you had a big fight with your spouse. On Tuesday, you were going to quit your job. On Wednesday, your teenager drove you mad. On Thursday, you almost got in a car accident with some jerk on the road. And on Friday, you're like, what just happened? So that's what I was saying.
so that was a release from the buildup of the week.
Yeah.
Now, if I wasn't in tune with my body, so you're saying that's a byproduct of you being in tune with your body.
No, if you're not, what I wrote in the book
What
is
you
like,
read.
yeah.
So that's a byproduct of you actually knowing what to do with those energies. Now walk us through, how did you get there? You again, I know you were born perfect, presuming you had some imperfections. How would you break that down? What was your soul's journey, your transformational journey as a leader, from your lack of, because I sense we all had it. If I had it, you had it. We're all both old souls, and we've talked about the work I do at a soul trauma level. So what was your experience with what I call disassociation, right? Body here, energy, awareness, soul, higher self, whatever you want to call it, whatever your terminology is, not here. So that's what I equate it to. How did you bring it back? What was your embodiment journey? Because you mentioned the trainings, maybe unpack those trainings for us as well. Yeah, like, because it may influence tools and techniques for people. What brought you here?
Yeah, what brought me here is, I think it was like 2017, I started doing body release workshops, I called them. And so like I just wanted to test this out with a nonprofit organization. They asked me to come in. And so I had the women move into their bodies. So we listened to music that had words where, that were saying things like, it's your time, um, it's your heart, give space to yourself. And then they were moving, and the only instruction I gave them, right, was wherever you feel resistance in your body, remember that, and then we'll talk about it. And then after we talked about it, then I said, okay, now we're gonna dance to another song, and we're going to send love to that part. So with the second song was actually a love song, and it was like, you know,
Hmm.
some love song that you'd listen to it and think of your lover, right? And I asked them to imagine that you are your own lover. So dance to this song, this love song, as if you're singing it to your inner self, right? Whatever's lacking, like whatever that part was, if it's your hip, if it's your heart, if it's your elbow, if it's your head, that's your lover. And you're gonna sing sweet nothings, sweet talk is what I call it, to
Mhm.
yourself. And so it allowed them to not only feel that emotion, like, whatever the hurt, the frustration, the anger, the sadness, then they could release it and then they could nurture themselves back to whole again.
And self-soothing and really like processing or alchemizing. Okay, question. Because now a couple of things come up. One is that was my embodiment journey. Is if you had asked me today, I know you don't, have that many men come across in these workshops, and sometimes they're exclusively for women. Like, let's say I was in that workshop, I would be if old Haas, calling me before I really started to heal fully myself, and do this inner work that we're espousing. I would have been rigid because I've been told I'm a great dancer. I'm Persian. We can move our hips and our shoulders very well. My hips go this way, shoulders go this way. Only I had to get drunk. I'll admit it. I would tell my girlfriends, "You want to go dancing?" I'd be like, "Okay, I got to get liquored up to get out of my head, to get into my body, to not be a clunky dude." Now, fortunately, I didn't ever do the white guy. I didn't ever fortunately do that. I kind of came close because I was raised around that. So I kind of did the little shimmy. And then if I was rigid, that's how I would dance. I was in my head and I was like, how am I supposed to do this clunky? What do you do? That's the first thing that comes up. What do you do with men or women, regardless of or irrespective of the gender? What do you do with that? How do you then coach them? Let's say that one, I'm the woman in the room and I'm like, especially when you get to the love. And it's funny because I did this in a workshop literally a few weeks ago. And so those that were in that workshop will attest to, this is why I say she's a soul sister, because we have a very similar resonance. I called it a self serenade and I played a love song and it was like, sing this to yourself. So I was like, oh, wow, okay, we really are similar. So
Yeah.
how do you tell the one rigid person or the rigid people in the room or the disassociated, the ones that don't have the mind, heart, body connection? How do you coach them in that room, in that dancing?
The great thing is I've done this workshop now with older women with many different demographics. Like I
Okay.
did it to a mixed crowd of men and women.
Okay.
One guy was like, "What do you do when people say they don't want to dance?" And I allow them to be in their own vibration and the rhythm of their breathing, right? It's
What if they
it's
can't do
still.
that? What if they're so traumatized? What if they're so disassociated that they literally have a visceral?
So I'm going to finish, Haas.
Oh, sorry.
um, you know, I've done it with Muslim women and then really women over 60. And in these particular cultures, I'm going to say,
Mhm.
Muslim women and older women, like in the Western world, even, they think that the kind of movements that I'm encouraging are not appropriate.
Hmm.
So they're not going to shimmy their hips and they're not going to, do the different
Hmm.
things that I'm suggesting. And in that case, it's really tuning in. And I did a different workshop. I've developed another workshop called Raise Your Vibration. And in this one, it's more of focusing on
Hmm.
um, actually where the vibration is in your body, you know? And so I use all these different sounds. I'll use um, the Quran.
Hmm.
That works really well actually with non-Muslims playing the Quran, like Ar-Rahman. This particular surah is about one of the names of Allah, the most merciful. Um, or I'll use affirmations music, which is more word speak, than actual, so they can focus on the words because the vibration of words matters. And the other thing I'll do is have you within yourself choose a polar positive opposite of a thought that you have. So you hear in your own vibration of your own voice what is, an opportunity for you, right? So it was like, oh, I just suck at dancing. I can't do this, right? So what's the polar positive opposite of that,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
My body has the ability to move.
And groove.
You know? And so that's what I've done. And I mean, that is just, workshops are just that, right? It's an interaction between um, me and a group of people. And I don't do a whole lot of workshops anymore because energetically, I feel like I really want to, if you really truly desire transformation, you're not going to get it in a half-day workshop.
Mm-hmm. Just starting.
So yeah, I'll do those like quarterly now, and maybe next year it'll be semi-annually. I really prefer the deep dive one-on-one because I really work with people one-on-one, and that's where the work can happen. And no matter how small I make the workshops, right? So I've done with like 17 people, 30 people, like that,
Mm.
all the way down to 10 people and 5 people. If you get one person alone out of the 5 people workshop, they'll tell you so much more than they will with 4 other people around, you know? And I'm really about the transformation. I'm really about you tuning into your own vibration and turning that up for yourself,
Mm.
and giving that safe space for you to do that. So that's what that's where you can really tune into your emotions and understand they are emotions. Because sometimes I've met people who, they were like, there's only 2 emotions. Women have told me this.
Mm.
You're either angry or you're happy. And I was like, there's like a whole rainbow.
It's the actual emotional wheel, everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, okay, tell me more about that. And yeah.
That was okay. So you answered that. It's interesting. So let's pause on this and go down this rabbit hole. They didn't like to shake their hips or move their, you didn't say shake, move their hips. It was inappropriate. I take them alone and then they tell me more. So I love to pull back veils. That's what a shaman does. I consider myself a business shaman, business wizard. I'm here to bring soul and impact. I know you do similar work. So I love to bring the veils apart. I like, this may touch on shadow work. And what is it in society that is, now I'm not saying we need to all run around naked and shimmy our hips. There is a little repression. There is, well, I won't say little, there's a lot of societal repression and conditioning around it's not okay to feel too good. I shouldn't be doing this. Or, oh, my mom, when I was a kid, said, ooh, don't do that. And then it imprinted, right? It impressed me. So what do we do about that? What's your perspective on that? How do we address that? How are you addressing that? If at
Yeah.
all, and it's okay if not. Yeah.
So for myself personally, um, and this is really new.
Mhm.
I thought that I was experiencing joy until I decided to be intentional about it, right? Because
Mm.
like, we're human, even though we're coaches. And so we'll tell our clients stuff, and on some level, whether it's because we're INTJ or whatever, we'll be like, oh, I already mastered that. And here's the thing, as long as you have breath in your body, you haven't mastered anything, because you're still breathing, which means learning opportunities are happening every second. So what I decided to do was like, what can I do today to create a moment of joy?
Mm.
And that's what I do every single day. And it looks different every single day. And what I discovered is that I was never really experiencing joy. Or if joy was happening, I wasn't allowing myself to receive it,
Mm.
right? And so what I was experiencing, and I already speak slow, I'm gonna speak slower. I was experiencing pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Pleasure is the shadow of joy.
Really? I've never heard that before. Keep going. Oh,
Yes.
another
Side,
learning point for me. Keep going. All right.
yeah.
Keep touching.
So
Yeah.
So let's give you an example. Like you'll say, um, I want I want to eat chocolate, right?
Uh-huh.
So you'll have like a Hershey's Kiss, which, to be honest, from a nutritional standpoint, is not chocolate. Okay.
Let's not bash Hershey's. They could do better with their cacao. It's real
Okay.
chocolate, everybody. It's cacao.
From a I'm saying from a
Mhm,
nutritional
I agree.
standpoint, right?
Pure sugar.
Dark chocolate, the more bitter, the better.
Mhm.
So if you allow yourself to have a square of dark chocolate and you eat it very slowly,
Mm,
all the way to the end, right? And you just let it touch the right part of your tongue and really,
yeah.
be present with the full experience of eating that square of chocolate. That's joy.
So what's this? Okay, so two things.
The
One,
Hershey's Kiss is pleasure, but the square of dark chocolate is joy.
so
So
what?
the Hershey's Kiss is just it's in the shadow
It's almost like
of,
delayed gratification is in a correlative way what you're discussing. Is
yes,
that a good correlation? Because you're
yes,
saying pleasure is like, let's get into it. Because we've talked about this. My eldest sibling, does this type of sexology work in his practice, and he influenced me, and I was already in the tantric, where I was attracted to these things and became an amateur sexologist myself as it related. And I know this is your pleasure theme of what you do, pleasure and presence, presence leadership. And it is very important, as you're already seeing in this episode, as you were shaped by it. And similarly myself, and I sense those listening. So there is this concept of this one contemporary of Freud and Jung, and we've talked about this, Wilhelm Reich, who was it literally posited that there's sexual energy, there's life force energy, chi, prana, and then there's sexual energy. Those are the two main life forces in the universe. And that because we're suppressing societally through conditioning, programs, traumas, etc., or misusing that energy, that's the source of a lot of dis-ease. So now, again, for those that are conservative listening, you have somebody raised Muslim and a converted Muslim talking about sexology. So yes, we are in the twilight zone officially. And as you and I talked about, this is one of the other reasons I want to do this episode this way, because these societal taboos, some of them are religious taboos, some of them are, that are misunderstandings collectively. And as I had a misunderstanding, because I started to get uncomfortable as you started to talk, I'll confess this, as you started to talk about the whole, well, that's our mirroring, right? As you and I have talked about, I'm headed in a converse direction. I'm learning to embrace the yin. You're learning to embrace the yang, as we've talked about privately, to explain some of the energetics her and I have in our space. So yeah, when you said slow down, and I start to wriggle and go, oh God, and start to get a little sweaty and go, shit. Oh, because for me, I still have that learning, that expanding to do of, yes, I've reached this cruising altitude of, you do the work enough and it's not like bumpy as much. So that's one thing I think the audience can relate to. So what is it societally, let's go deeper if you're okay with this, that makes us go, oh my God, oh, I'm getting into really enjoying bringing the joy really in. And then we go, oh, you shit it. For me, I was raised Muslim. I mean, that was one of the biggest holdups for me. I think if you're raised Catholic, it may be similar. It was like, no, 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 you're not, you need to marry and blah, blah, blah. And or Shiites do sirah, which we've talked about, temporary marriage. So I'm blabbering on because I'm excited again about these topics. And we're both passionate equally. What do you, from your perspective as an expert in this field and more qualified since you have a yoni, what is the holdup? Because you talked about this, your story, to tell the audience your story on her website, which will be in the comments below. She's always been sensual, right? Am I accurate in describing your life story? You've always been able to put the chocolate in your mouth and like let it out. Me, I've been like, oh, chocolate, like
yeah, you're like Cookie Monster. You're
yeah,
like,
exactly, the Cookie Monster, the Haas Monster. I'm like, me want candy, Sour Patch Kids. What is it about us? It's not only men, women do it too. I've worked with a lot of women like you do. So what is that? Why are we doing that?
it's a shame culture, right?
Ooh, bring it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like we're shamed into, and it's not just a Muslim thing, right? I felt this strongly growing up. My background is like Episcopalian,
Hmm.
and if I were white, I'd be a wasp. because that's what white
Is that what?
Anglo-Saxon is.
Oh, is that what that means? Okay. All right. It's not a Baptist godmother. I didn't know. I thought it was Protestant. Episcopalian is related. I don't know all the denominations of the church. That's why. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
You were saying something.
So yeah, but white Anglo-Saxon Protestant means Anglican Church.
Oh,
And
and
so
that's
that's
Episcopalian. Oh, okay.
yeah. So the Anglican Church was the Church of England. So my great grandfather actually was an Anglican priest. Um, yeah.
Brush that
And
shoulder.
he was half white.
That shoulder off, girl. Brush that shoulder. Got an archbishop in the house.
So yes, it comes from shame. So I was very conflicted, right? Growing up, it's like I have to be the good girl,
Amen.
right? You had to be the good boy. You get married to have sex. I get married to have sex, right? And we have bodies that go through puberty, and then we have like these sexual feelings, and we have these emotions attached to these feelings, and we start to judge ourselves. And so it becomes a practice, right? To halt. Let me feel the joy, but not too much, right? Let me feel the pleasure, but oh my gosh, I hope no one's watching, right? Or, you have to be in an altered state, right? You have to be drunk, you have to be high, and then I can blame it on that. Oh, I did that because I was drunk, right?
The black.
Heaven forbid you be sober and you're actually like, I
Enjoying the
just want to,
sensuality.
yeah, you're just enjoying your sensuality. And so the beautiful thing about this whole better understanding of joy, everything that I've gone through, I've always wanted to study like it Islamically since I became Muslim. 20-year anniversary this year. I just want to say that. Yeah, it is.
Ashahud anniversary, everybody. Woo woo.
My Shahada anniversary, right? So 2 months before September 11th, I became Muslim.
Oh yeah, we talked about this.
We had that conversation.
I dropped my Muslim name, or I dropped my non-Muslim name 2 months before 9/11, and it became Hassan Sadeghi. And you converted. So again, another flip-flopping irony. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So now, like with my study of joy and pleasure, I have really gone into, okay, so Islamically, how do I do that? What is that? And come to find out that about before colonialism, right? About 150, 200 years ago, well, more than that, right? Before colonial times in the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries, everyone in the world was running to the Orient, right? To solve their marital problems, their sex problems.
Yes.
And that's where, so there's like this whole body of work in sexology and erotology, eroticism.
Say it again.
Erotology, EROTOLOGY. Yeah. And it's based in like Muslim text, and they were all hidden in Farsi. So they were in Iran, and they didn't want to translate them into English.
We don't want you to use it on our women.
And yeah, and there's a lot there that you just have to think about how the patriarchy and capitalism wants to suppress us, right? Like, oh no, if people knew that Muslims know what's up with sex, they're going to make way more money than us. Muslims, you're really repressed people. You oppress your women. Meanwhile, 1787 in New Orleans, there was a Tignon law. Tignon law means Tignon is the head wrap. So many mulatto and Black women were being taken on as concubines of the really rich white men. They made their wives were getting pissed because they're like, okay, that Black woman's making way more money and getting way more attention from my husband. They have to cover their hair. So that's what a tignon is. So it was actually white men telling Black women, you have to cover your hair in order to walk out in public. Interestingly enough, now, right, even though in Islam, we cover our hair, it's a whole different story. So taking you back to the foundation of Islam, in Saudi Arabia, once upon a time, women did really walk around like Jasmine in, Aladdin, because they didn't have a choice, because they were considered chattel, because they were less than human. So they had to wear rags and walk around naked. So
Mm,
when Islam came, wear hijab, honor your women, respect your women, cover her beauty.
mm. Heaven is under the foot of the mother. Cherish them, right, and uplift them. Do not downtrodden them. Do not subjugate them. Right? And chattel is a legal word, and that's historical because when marriage came about, sociologically, women were then made into property, legally speaking. That's what chattel is, a legal word. Everybody, I'm a lawyer by trade as well as other trades. So a couple of things that you're bringing up really fascinating, and this is good because this is the avenue I sensed we would go down. Two things. One, back to Wilhelm Reich and this notion of sexual energy. And you mentioned it at the beginning, you had an orgasmic pause when you were giving birth, right? This altered state of consciousness. The mystics say similar things, plant medicine, Tony Robbins talked about it, Mike's Tyson's show. Everybody is understanding we're in a great awakening. We have to use more greater realms of our beingness. So Wilhelm Reich talks about this, and for everybody's understanding, but we're all bioelectric beings, right? So orgasm, bliss, ecstasy, samadhi, nirvana, all various terms to describe this vibratory state, is a very unadulterated, expansive state of energy where you're bringing in higher vibrational energy, higher states of love, gratitude, joy, and the sistar state, and literally raising your vibration. Now, what gets in the way is, well, that's what liberation is. That's what, all these terms correlate to ascension. That's raising your vibratory state, raising your bioelectricity, your light, your bliss. So we're meant to bring heaven on earth. So that's the one aspect. And what gets in the way, and you said it, and I wrote it down, we're divided within. The shame, is it safe to say, is the shadow. So if you're new to these concepts, this concept of shadow work in psychosynthesis, Jungian psychology, psychotherapy, whatever you want to call it, it's this notion of we have these disowned parts of ourselves, whether they come from society or not, and then we're torn within. Is that a safe encapsulation then, Cordelia, from what you're saying? So is that what then gets in the way? I'm rhetorically teeing it up, leading you. So that is what gets in the way. So what do we do? How are you dealing with the shadow work and the shame? Because yes, you hit the nail on the head and you saw me going along. Yeah, I thought I had to be a good boy and hide all these despicable traits. And those despicable traits would come out when I would party. Like as an attorney full-time, would party hard, and I do some substances that was when people ask me now, it was a numbing agent for me not to judge myself, to do the things I thought were I shouldn't shake my hip type behavior from your workshop reference as an analogy. How do I heal that? If you were dealing with me then, right? Because I've healed that. How would you have worked on me as a male leader? That you're like, Haas, you're disconnected. Haas, you're torn with it. Haas, you're conflicted with it. Yeah, talk to me.
Let's be clear. I would not have worked with you then because you'd have to be open to working with me. I don't yank people.
Okay,
You'd have to be.
Yeah, talk to us about it because that's enrollment and commitment. So beautiful. Let's broach down and continue.
Yeah, that guy I would never work with. the guy who is like, you know what? I know there's something deeper. I want to stop self-medicating. That guy I would talk to. At least I'd have a conversation. Right? I think I met that guy on Saturday. I'm not even kidding. I did meet a guy like this on Saturday. And yeah, he's like a VP. And he was just like, how do I be with my emotions and still be professional? And I was trying to figure out how to answer that because it's like, what really is his question? So I said, tell me more about that. And he's like, well, I work in a toxic work environment, and I really sometimes just want to tell my bosses, the way I feel. And at the same time, I fear for my job. And at the same time, I want to leave my job, and but we're doing such a great, service in the world that I know that I'm meant to be there. And I said, well, what if you made it about you? Because right now you're judging them. So whatever it is that you're seeing in them is in you. So what if you focused more on going inward and nurturing yourself?
Hmm.
And he recognizes that he had toxic shame and his inner child and all that stuff. So what if you did that work? Your being would radiate differently, and without saying a word, you could affect the energy of your work environment. And it would be
That's powerful.
two things that will happen, right? That is powerful. Two things will happen. First of all, your perception is going to change because you're not going to see your environment as toxic because you're not toxic. Secondly, vibrationally, you're going to be higher. So the people, because we're like about, well, I can't, my hands don't even fit in the screen, but we're like pretty big, like our energy when
Our
we're
energy.
walking down the street,
Mhm.
right? So even if those people are, you know, the way they are, you're coming in the new you and you're like, boom, right? And it's like the
Hmm.
ripple effect of your energy in that office will change things, especially in his position. And he was like, he hasn't called me. So I think he's still thinking about it. He's like, I'm going to have to marinate on that.
It's a
And
big
I'm like, I'll talk to you in a month.
It's a big shift because so let's unpack that. Two things. One, because this is what you do, right? Because you let's demonstrate this even more because you're doing a very good job of then what is the pragmatic impact of doing these inner, works, these transformations, alchemy, whatever you want to call it, embodiment work, presencing work, pleasure work, is that you have a more present state and bliss, ecstasy, all this aside, when you expand your consciousness, however you do it, right? Healthfully, you have more here, more presence here. Is that accurate then? You're speaking my lingo. I'm double checking so I don't misspeak or make sure I understand how you're presenting it. So then, yeah, so that seems really potent. So again, then it's getting rid of and I like how you said it because I always say that it's an energetic extension of the leader. The energy comes through you, and then the organism, which is the ecosystem organization, whatever you co-found, whatever you run, is an extension of you. So then you're saying that then you also confirm that you rise higher. So you don't have that shit in your system that you're casting out into the field, and you're at a higher state, more embodied bioelectricity. So you're more magnetic. You can move and do more. Is that accurate? So we're talking performance, flow state, positive psychology. Her and I would say you would agree with this too. That's scratching the surface. We're talking at a purely energetic level. Let's cut through the nonsense and stop dancing around not only sexuality and pleasure. Let's stop dancing around what we're all doing here, which is we're awakening. It's not only mindfulness and emotional quotient, it's energetic awakening as well, which is at a higher level. So, okay. So this is good. So yeah, and there's resistance, right? So that's the whole, they need to marinate because you're putting them against themselves. You're flipping the mirror. A lot of times you and I and many other colleagues that do this work, we're mirrors, right?
Yeah.
So then they're seeing this inner conflict. I had a gal tell me this. She said, Haas, we had one quick mini session and she said, Haas, I feel after our session, I feel conflicted. So what do you mean? She said, I feel like my one side of myself doesn't like the other side of myself. And that came up after our session. And I said, or that was always present. And we brought your awareness to it, talking about it. And so now the light of awareness is on that blind spot of energy that you were running from, which was unpleasurable. And you still didn't want to see it. And she goes, oh, so you mean, and I said, correct, shit comes out, garbage in, garbage out. You said it best, toxicity. So how do we, is this shadow work then, dealing with the junk? And how do you deal with the junk? I shouldn't say junk as in the shadows junk, the stuff that we treat as junk that's really treasure. Let me rephrase that. How do you take that? Because that's that alchemy, transmutating it, right? Taking it from lead or things we don't like to then all of a sudden making that something we cherish or treasure. How do you do that work? And why is it important as leaders from your perspective as it relates to pleasure, right? Because that's what gets in the way, as we've said, of the pleasure.
Yeah. It's very individual. Like I said, I work with people one-on-one. So it looks, you know, pleasure and presence looks different depending on who you are.
Hmm.
you know some people, they're trying to reach more deeply into their feminine energy, right? and some people are trying to reach into their masculine energy, and some people are just wanting to feel.
Hmm. Hmm. If you want to feel, how does the shadow get in the way?
Um, those are people more in their head.
Hmm.
Like earlier, that comment I said that the heart and the mind are one, they're still stuck on that part. They're just like, I don't even know what that means. Like what she said, that doesn't still explain it. That doesn't make any sense. Even Haas can't translate what she's saying. She's saying what she's saying is like a bunch of crap.
Thinking, loop, loop, loop,
Yes.
thought pattern, loop.
Right. So when we're born, we have our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And although we're verbalizing, nobody understands what we're saying. So for 2 years, depending on who your caretaker is, you were not listened to. And all that's stored in your muscle memory. So if you just close your eyes and let, there's this, I don't even know what it's called, is static dancing or something like that. I don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that. But, that's what that's about. It's about you just moving your body wildly. And on some level, you're releasing, and on some level, you may be feeling something. And I've been in those ecstatic dancing parties. And for the people that don't feel, they still don't feel. Like they don't have any emotions attached to that. They may cry, they may laugh, even though they spend, like 15, 20 minutes moving their bodies around, they're just sweaty.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
one of the times I was in one of these, we then did it through chakras, right? So we had to move our root chakra. And for people who don't know what that is, that's your hips. It's actually from your hips to your feet, right? Because that's the grounding part of us. So like, and it's hard for people who don't feel. There was, I can't remember what the statistics are, but something crazy like 70% of women have never had an orgasm. And 70% of women who have had sex have not had an orgasm. Just to give you an idea of like how just commonplace not feeling or experiencing pleasure is, right? And there are two explanations for that. One is just not allowing, not surrendering, right? And the other one is a little bit deeper than that. It's a conditioning, it's just not being able to overcome the conditioning. Women have the capacity to feel pleasure more than anybody on the planet. And when you surrender to that and allow that, it's a beautiful thing. It's a passionate thing. Everything can be pleasurable. Breathing can be pleasurable. You can drink a glass of water. You can walk in the sunshine. You can lay in the grass, and it'll be like, the longest 60 seconds of your life, right? Or the longest 13 minutes of your life, right? So it takes, and like the average time for a woman to climax is about 13, 14 minutes, right? So what if here's an experiment. What if you were to take 13 or 14 minutes and just allow yourself to surrender to feeling, like just feeling, right? And noticing what you're feeling. Like, am I feeling heat? Am I feeling cool? Am I feeling tickling? Am I feeling, what am I feeling on your skin? Keep it like simple. Don't worry about the inside yet. Just like spend 15 minutes a day surrendering to feeling and see where that gets you. And, building up that muscle is powerful, isn't it, Haas?
Well, it's two things. So yes to all of that. So you said muscle, and it's like that's where when you go to the constriction, right? Because the anatomy mirrors the energy, and vice versa. As is up, so is below. So are you comfortable talking about how you went through unlocking your physical anatomy? Because as we've talked about offline, there is a correlation from my studies, from other practitioners I've seen, and a lot of the basis of what you're saying is beautifully, what you're saying, it's articulated in the healing episodes we did in season 1, which is this whole, the body has its natural way of moving, let it flow. So if you need more of a basis for that and you're watching, you can go back and watch those episodes to unpack. So it's really much building. I love how this is building on that. You need to do the healing work to then do what I would say your work, it builds on a healthy body, or you help heal their body as a result of this work. How did you unlock your pubis? Because you talk about the hips, the chakras, if you don't know, are energies that mirror the endocrine system, which then overlap with the body, obviously. So my theory, as we've talked about, is that then it's all bioelectricity. Women clench their pubis, men do this too, and we almost lock up. We lock all of our body, so it's almost like the electricity doesn't go. There's a piping, and we don't allow the electricity to flow through. That's why we're having 70% of the populace never had an orgasm, because they're not allowing their natural pleasure state, their natural, which is Wilhelm Reich, the father of sexology, contemporary of Freud. And talk to me, bring it out.
I think I already said that.
Yeah.
The original father of sexology, of sexology.
Oh, I apologize. The granddaddy, grand poobahs were the Sufis. Yes. Listen to me. I'm my own colonialist. It's my culture in a way. I was like giving it to the white guys.
What are you saying, Haas? Like your people, like the Persians, right?
I'm a self-deprecating Persian. I'm kidding. No,
and the Germans translated, right?
Good reminder. Yeah, good reminder, which we're going to get into if you're okay running over, because usually these episodes go all sorts of lengths, which I want to talk about that shadow Islamic mysticism later if we get a chance, because I know we do that work. So there's this notion then of opening up the body as well as opening up the heart, the mind, and the energy. What was if you're comfortable, if not, that's okay, we can gloss over it. What was your experience as a woman unlocking that, and what techniques and stuff did you use? Because I think it's very important for the woman listening. There's a 70%.
So I'm going to answer that question like this. I wrote a book called Detached Love, Transforming Your Heart so you can transform your mind, and it's in there.
Detached Love, say it again for the audience. Show it to them.
Detached Love.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And by Cordelia Gaffar. Yeah. Okay. So check that out, because I personally know her experience with it. And it's a lot of advanced work that you can do, and you can access that book for it. Okay. So we're anything else you want to say? Well, I know, let's actually organically go to what is Replenish Me? One of the ways you offer this, because you're all about, if you haven't known by now, she's about presence, leadership, pleasure, how you can use that, opening up emotions, as all these themes we've been talking about. That's her lesson she's brought now to the business community, to the leadership community. What do you want to say about Replenish Me? Why are you doing this work? And then tell us more about it.
Yeah, Replenish Me is, it's a way to be mindful and really move towards self-leadership. Just the words, right? The vibration of the name of something matters. Out of all the words in the English language, I could have chosen any phrase. And Replenish Me says a lot without using too many words. Just like the title of my book, Detached Love, says a lot without me saying the subtitle, right? And leaders, they like to say, I'm a servant leader, right? Okay, that's great. So serve yourself.
Correct.
Lead yourself, replenish yourself. And as you do for yourself, you can do for others. I can also tell you that there are 4 steps, and that's not going to serve anybody if I share it in that way. Giving you the definition that I just did, I think is more impactful.
I call that bringing the soul back to leadership. I think my vernacular for it is reviving yourself. The replenishing, when you said it, I said, this is brilliant when I saw it on your site. And you had recently created it when I said that, I think within the last few, when did you When did you pivot to this? Like, when was this, I'm going to call it replenish me. When was this intentional, like, ooh, dropped in insight wise, as far as your inspiration for all this?
Replenish Me actually came in about 2019. It was always the name of my podcast. And when I renamed my podcast to Free to Be, I was like, oh, good, because my work really is replenish me, you know?
Hmm.
So like podcasts can be free to be, but the work that I do with people is about replenish me. Yeah.
Would you say your transformational journey was about replenishing yourself then?
Yeah, definitely. And you know, when I say the vibration of stuff, right? So all those years using the podcast and interviewing all the hundreds of people, I was seeking the information to replenish me. And once I was full, then I wanted to be free to be. So I renamed the podcast, and all my learnings, you know,
Hmm.
um, went into, well, it was already there, but it just, you know, made my work fuller. And so now that I'm free to be, I've paused that podcast and I talk about presence and pleasure.
Hmm. So in this leadership paradigm that we're in, what do you think is getting in the way of presencing work? I know we've touched on this in other ways in our talk right now.
Yeah, just not the biggest barrier is not knowing how to receive. People can talk about what they desire all day long. I just did a post about this today. I was like, do you really know what you want? Do you really know what you desire? And
Hmm.
are you capable of receiving it when it manifests? Because like, oh, I want abundance, da, da, da. And then like abundance is right here behind the veil. And you're just like, yeah, I'm welcoming abundance, right? Are you receiving it? Like, have you like looked on the other side of the veil to like, yeah, come on in.
So if you ask for God to come knocking, using an analogy, and God's knocking and you refuse to answer the door, it's your fault. Do you think that correlates, not to backpedal real quick, eh, to the sexuality, to the restrictions that we see in the field and in our society, that we're almost like denouncing our own pleasure, we're denouncing receiving? So it's the
Yeah.
correlations there.
Yeah. It's kind of like a woman will want to have sex, right? And then she'll, you know, have an opportunity presented and completely dry up after being completely wet, you know, like,
So the biophysical response obviously correlates to the emotions, the energies, and all that. Can we talk about this notion of societal shame, and not, again, separate from the Me Too movement? It's more of, sorry for the crass way of putting this. I don't know any other nice way of saying it. Slut shaming. This notion of, either the woman shames herself. Men do it too, and probably in a certain form if you're raised conservative. So let's take the gender out of it. I sense a lot of women have this more, mostly probably women than men, because this societal then equal conditioning that men should have sex willy nilly. It's okay. He's just a man. So I don't believe in any of that. I think it needs to be equal and should be. So what's your take on that? This notion of again, sorry for the crassness if you're in the audience, this self-shaming, slut shaming, that, oh God, there's something icky with me because I like pleasure, and I like, one way I like it is through the sexual act. Obviously, mindfully, intentionally, clean. Again, we're espousing consciousness here, so these
so
are applied. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
let me just say it like this.
Yeah,
So I'm going to connect a whole bunch of dots real quick. So
beautiful. I
we
love it.
have we all come from the oneness, right? So
Yes.
while we recognize that the chakras are, you know, 7 different centers that are connected to our different organ systems, right?
Hmm.
We're one organism connected to one source,
Hmm.
right? So all of our energy is just the when we allow the embodiment of love. In our human form, we express that love through sex, right?
Hmm.
In our spiritual form, we can just simply connect with the divine.
Hmm.
So there's no need to have intercourse.
Hmm.
In the physical body, vessels need to connect through this exchange of bodies and fluids and energy.
Mhm.
And so when we don't allow ourselves to surrender to ourselves, replenish me, right? In the replenish me format,
Mhm.
then we also are creating a barrier to receiving from others.
Mhm.
That plays out at work, at home,
Mhm.
you know, every place we go in the world. Why is it that I'm always getting cut off in traffic? You
Mhm.
know, are you always getting cut off in traffic? I mean, that can be a perception. A
Mhm.
lot of times, just to have a little bit of a tangent, sometimes people will actually cuss me out, right? And I just smile and wave. I'm like, I love you, sweetheart. You have a better day. And it's it's the barrier of not receiving, the barrier of not allowing, the barrier of not truly speaking from your core, right? When you speak from your oneness of your energy, of all your chakra energy being together, connected to the oneness, which is the appropriate English translation of Allah. It means the oneness, right?
Mm. Love it.
Mhm. Then you can, when you speak, you'll say something like, I want to be on Haas's podcast for his first episode, season 2. And it happens.
It's the wildest dream come true. Yeah, right.
you know.
Pretty
And
please be on my show, pretty please.
right. And it's like, I had that thought. I never told you. And then I get this email just like that. He was like, please be on my show.
Well, it wasn't exactly like that. I did tell
I'll
you.
be honest. No, I know.
Well, I did tell you it popped into my head during meditation as
Yeah.
I'm allowing more and more being an example of what we're espousing on the show as you are. And that's the whole premise of spotlighting. So that's really beautifully put. I wrote down. So you're showing people, let's put another vernacular to it in a really advanced spiritual way. So you're showing people how to be leaders who come from their oneness, who act, lead, show up from their oneness. Is
Yeah,
that accurate? That's
that
some
is accurate.
that's some next level work, sister. That's some next level work. That sounds like global, bringing in a new earth, a new entire paradigm on this planet. So let's tie this to shadow work. Well, I didn't interject on that flow, did I? Did you connect? Were you?
No, we're good.
Okay. So well, let's wind down and get more into if there's anything else on the replenish me, and if not, let's go to this shadow work, how you do it, which I found interesting because I told you when we met that first time, holy cow, please show me, because ironically, it's like I come from that culture, and that's the one mystical tradition I did not actually deep dive into, ironically. And then we've talked about maybe down the line how I could help translate some of these texts and etc. So talk to me, because I still have been asking you, so maybe we can do a little bit of it now. What is the influence you had from Islamic mysticism? And as I told you, most people, you knew this, most people don't know this, that illuminationism, this joking concept, kind of conspiratorial, whatever you want to call it, Illuminati. Well, illuminationism is this notion that came from mysticism in Sufi traditions. So, what was your influence from the Islamic mysticism, and why did it influence you? And then, how does that translate to the work you do in the shadow work? Because you use that tradition, I don't. Ironically, yeah.
I do and I don't, because Replenish Me is kind of, my own creation that
Mhm.
has a lot of sources,
Of
which,
course.
when you read my book, you'll see what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
you're
So
very
it's not,
syncretic, like me. I
yeah,
synthesize. I agree with that. Yes.
yeah. So, like I said, going into my marriage and being and having children, I had lost my parents in my mid-20s. So I was struggling with grief, which presented itself as in my body. I had 2 miscarriages.
Mhm.
So and then I had postpartum depression. So to overcome my depression, which I realized was just this enormous grief that I never dealt with. I never dealt with the grief of losing my parents in consecutive
You
years.
depressed it. Yeah. You
Right. I depressed it.
go into depression. Yeah.
So it was causing, these things in my body. And I wanted to research that. So I was, reading like the purification of the heart. So a lot of works from Al-Ghazali, and Al-Ghazali is one of the
Spell it for the American or non-middle.
AL dash GHAZZAIL, I think it is.
Al-Jazali, so phonetically Jazali.
Ghazali. We don't have Ghain.
It was a G. Spell it one more time. I'm sorry. ALGHAZZAL.
Yeah.
Ghazali.
L-I.
GHAZZALI. Ghazali. Keep going. Al-Ghazali.
Right. So he wrote a lot about emotions, right? So in order to overcome grief, this is considered a disease of the heart, is gratitude, right? It took me about 5 years to really there's all this non-religious specific work around gratitude, right? And in tasawwuf, when you talk about gratitude, it's that this is the great thing about Arabic, right? Because you can say one word and it'll be like a paragraph in English.
Literal. Yeah.
Right. So gratitude is like, it's more than just saying thank you. It's really embodying the love of the connection that you have with the thing that you're grieving, right? So if you grieve something, you grieve it because you miss it, because you love it so much. And just being grateful for having experienced that love. So every time that doesn't mean you're not going to cry. It just changes the way it feels in your body, as opposed to kind of what I explained in that passage, right? And instead of it being like you feel sick, you now are feeling healthy. So just understanding like allowing the bliss centers to open, right? Because at the top of all of our chakras is the bliss center. And if we allow ourselves to be grateful for everything, so that was my practice. And that I was just like, wait, I'm grateful, right? Like I say alhamdulillah, right? Alhamdulillah is like, all praise and thanks to Allah for, everything, right? It's just one word, alhamdulillah, right? And you can say something and you can say something. Like I just said that earlier about pulling back the veil. I receive abundance, right? So you can either say alhamdulillah, right? Or you can say alhamdulillah.
Embodied.
And you feel the vibration. And that's what Tajweed is about, right? The way we connect it. It's about the vibration of the meaning of the words filling up your vessel so that it transforms your heart and changes the way you think.
You're talking, you're speaking my lingo in a different form. Yeah, the inner alchemy, as I call it, because like you said, so it seems like, and I do know that much, that the Islamic mystics, the Sufism, this notion of the alchemy was there. That was one of the places it came from and sprouted from, because it very beautifully put, because we talked about shame and another shadow emotion, grief, which I personally have experience with, as you know, and you did. So then you have to alchemize that, as you said. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Islamically, shame comes from shaitan. And it's attached to a certain part of the body only, which interestingly enough is the backside of where the
pelvis,
the backside of the pelvis. Yeah. So where your reproductive organs are, whether you're a man or a woman. So a lot of times, if you are suffering from shame, you will have a lot of lower back pain. Think about how common lower back pain is, and think about how many people manage their pain when they could just have sex. No, I'm just kidding. What I mean?
You're not kidding, because that was Wilhelm Reich's thesis. And unfortunately he was ahead of his time, and it's
or behind his time, if depending on
well, yeah, but it's a taboo. Maybe now we can adopt it, because what he was saying is essentially every dis-ease is a misuse of sexual energy. And we see it now rife in society. We have so many imbalances, so many polarity shifts and charges. So there are people, and I would agree, because you're liberating energy when you do that. Sexual healing. Maybe Marvin Gaye was a healer and didn't know it. Let's all have sexual healing. So it's beautifully put that you're saying this, but let me pause on this, because you say shadow is from shaitan. Those that don't speak Arabic, shaitan is from set, Satan, all correlations, Latin, etc. in Arabic. So there is a school of thought, and I learned this last year. There is a school of thought from the theosophy, more from the Western mysticism tradition, that those are the lower 9 gates. So let's take the body and break it down. You have the upper centers and you have the lower centers, and the lower centers in this school of thought they call, or metaphysics, they call the 9 lower gates of hell. So that's why maybe the vices and some of this shame. So that's where in other schools of thought, they talk about raising your energy to a higher state, leading from higher energy centers and no longer being dominated by your lower animal. That's another one, lower animal instincts, so to speak, right? Bringing sexuality to a higher state. And you alluded to it earlier very beautifully, a divine sexuality, not effing, sexing.
But sex is only divine. That's the part
Correct.
that's the whole point I'm trying to say,
Bring that
because
out. Yeah.
in sex, it's a spiritual connection using your body. So you
Say
can't,
that again for dramatic effect.
sex, intercourse, think about that word. It's a spiritual connection using your body. So, while man has tried to economize it and regulate it, right, through regulating women's bodies, it's like, well, we're going to give her birth control. We're going to make her marry a man, so that she'll know that she belongs to him, right? Or a woman can choose a man that is of the appropriate consciousness and divinity to even deserve to be in her presence and to connect with her spiritually. And she, when a woman's in her divine consciousness, she'll know whether or not his sperm is worthy to enter her body and help her to procreate if that's what she chooses.
So that's interesting, right? Because that would require self-love, self-worth, which is undermining this from the feminine's perspective of, if they don't feel holiness, they don't feel their holiness, then they're going to attract unholy partners, which furthers this cycle of shame, self-loathing. And I deal with this. I know you deal with this with clients. So there is this notion to be said that once you elevate your frequency, you do this inner work as a leader, this is now more of the personal side of the work, which does show up, because if you're unpersonally happy, as I know you see with clients, you're not going to be happy at work. So if most likely you're not getting laid properly and divinely inspired, you're not going to be a happy boss. Sorry to break it to you. Would you agree, for that crass way of saying it, maybe not the way I said it jokingly, would you agree that this does spill over? Because maybe the audience is like, well, why do I need to care about this? I'm a business guy or a business gal. Would it spill over from the clients you see?
It would spill over. And even, people may think, okay, Cordelia, that's fine. I've got some side pussy, right? Or I've got some side dick, right?
Yeah.
And how's that working out for you? Like, are you?
Well, that's out of integrity. Yeah, that's out of integrity. I would question that's out of integrity there. Yeah, because you're doing it on the side. You're not really owning it. You're not balls in. You're not all in,
Yeah. So like you have to, like, I have some divine dick on, on call. That's different.
Well, it is the orientation. I guess that's what we're inviting in.
So like for Muslims, right? That means I'm married.
Correct.
Let's just be clear. And if you're not Muslim, or if you're not, I'm sorry,
married only. Well, what's the other form? Maybe people that are Muslim may not even know this temporary marriage. It could mean marriage. Is that really marriage? Real quick to pause you. Is that
So
the way for a Muslim?
you know what? Not to tangent too much
Yeah,
because there's a lot of hilaf on the
yeah.
pleasure marriage or,
There's
um,
controversy. Well, a lot of what we're talking about is fringe, which is fine. We're pushing the envelope, and that's the intention, one of the intentions of the show.
yeah. So
Show
there's a lot of Muslims that are like not on board with
that's fine.
nikah mut'at, which is a temporary marriage,
Mhm,
and it's still a marriage, right? So it's a choice to enter into a legal contract with someone of the opposite sex,
mhm.
because in Islam, that's the way it goes. And
A lot of lawyers.
I know, right? And there's still a dowry that goes to the woman. And the only difference between a regular marriage contract and this kind of contract is there's an expiration date. You
Hmm.
can renew at the expiration date, or you can be like, peace. Um, and it's the woman's choice, to be clear. It's not about the man, because a lot of this is the conflict. A lot of women are like, how, you're not going to use my daughter for the weekend. Well, like, if she's the one that writes the contract, like, if she's like, I'd like to use your son for the weekend, there's that.
Mhm.
So I'm a little bit making light of it.
Well, hold on. I don't think you're making light of it. Even before we met, I had this philosophy, and again, I think it speaks to our soul's resonance, that it's a container, right? It's a
Yeah.
container. My brother's an expert at conscious uncoupling, so the last few years have been around that energy. So that's, again, same thing. If you study higher dimensional work, Lemuria, another dimensional state of higher beingness, all of these things say something similar, that it's a conscious choice for two beings to come together and create a container and a sacred space, liminal space, a container for a specific purpose, whether it be procreation. And this pleasure contract, siga, as Muslim Shiite Persians call it, it's literally for pleasure. Marriage, that container. I don't like contracts because then we go back to dowry, chattel, the subjugation of women. I know
So
that's not what you meant. I like to be precise with the words. So I think that's the
yeah,
container concept, which is why I wanted
yeah,
to touch on it for a quick second. Yeah.
yeah. It's very important. I know that, not to tangent too much, I know there's like another concept of polyamory,
Mhm.
which is not related to anything that I
Correct.
study
Correct.
or anything Islamic.
Yeah.
And I can't really speak to what all
Correct.
that means. However, the vast majority of humans don't have the capacity to deeply spiritually connect w- with more than one human being.
Mhm.
Like, so it's, if you're a man, you know, you just have a connection with one woman. And if you're a woman, you have a connection with one man. Otherwise, you're not having a divine connection at all.
Mhm.
Um, and
I think it goes back to your point about the organization. It's like abusing the staff, only trying to take energy. Again, for me, all of this, the whole premise of the show, and here in this particular instance, we're speaking to, inviting in a reframe, a shift, a different expanded awareness of pleasure, presence, motherhood, embodiment work, nurturing, and here sensuality, sexuality. They're not exactly the same. So again, if you hold conservative beliefs, we're not saying you have to get rid of them. We're inviting in a more understanding from an essence, what was meant, past all the conditioning, past all the societal programs, past all the neuroses, past all this trauma epidemic, past all cycles of ritual abuse, which that's a whole nother thing that we probably don't have time to talk about here. Sex trafficking, ritual sexuality, people that are sex. I mean, this stuff is real. It's an underbelly of society that isn't talked about.
in a way, when you can say that when you misuse your staff, you're sex trafficking them, right? Because
Mm,
you're really,
yeah.
you're being like a slave driver. You're not you're not honoring them for their skill set. You're not honoring them as human beings who are giving of their day to be, to use their skills for your organization. That's what's really happening. It's not the other way around, right? It's not that they only work for you and they have no life. They have a life and they choose. to spend these hours out of their day with your organization. And when you think of it from that perspective as a leader, it humbles you. It
Well, it's the
should.
same thing, right? You're saying that it's the energetics, it's the essence, it's the presence of it, because how you show up in that relational dynamic, it sounds like the same. You're doing it with intention, right? That's the word that keeps popping up for both in our, how we both show, intentionally choosing on both fronts, whether as a leader, which means as a leader, you also have to cherish your fellow human beings, which I think goes back to this, you're not sick anymore. You're not, because only hurt people, right? So there's this, you have done that work. So in both categories, you've done enough work, because you said this earlier, you know what is worthy for you if you're a woman or a man, and you attract that worthiness. Same with an employee. So I think we're really speaking to toxic sexuality, toxic leadership, and stepping out of that, to put another vernacular or phraseology. So I'm glad that you brought up the whole polyamory or open relationships, because yeah, it does. I think that's where people throw out the baby with the bathwater, right, Cordelia, as you know, and they go, "Whoa, you sound like a devil worshiper. All right, I'm going to stop listening now." And it's like, well, don't muddle the two. Let's separate. Let's be precise. Let's be intentional and conscious and
Yeah.
invite in. You don't have to believe us. This is all about hearing something and expanding your realm of beingness. Okay.
There's a lot of expansion in this conversation.
Huge, right? I
and,
told you this is going to be an experience. Yeah.
and depending on where you are as the listener and viewer in your journey,
Mm.
you'll receive it at that level. And if you listen in a year from now, you'll receive it at that level. So it's a gift that's going to keep giving. And as much as you allow, you'll receive.
Beautifully put. As much as you allow, you receive. I like that. I like that. Anything else you feel inspired to say about the shadow work, or your influence by Islamic mysticism? Anything in that realm?
In this moment, I feel complete.
Okay. That may
The
change.
that may change, because as I was letting those words come out my mouth, I was thinking about the difference in the Islamic story of Adam and Eve. We call her Hawa, which means honey or the sweetness, right? So instead of Eve, it's Hawa.
I
And
didn't know that. Oh,
you
wow.
didn't know that? Yeah. So the difference in the story is that um there was they were equally punished. So once upon a time, Allah put Hawa in the garden, and Adam was overcome with desire for her, right? And when he was going to her to have sex with her, Gabriel came between them and said, "No, you have to give her a dowry." And the dowry were words, right?
Hmm.
And it's basically the dua or the prayer
Energy.
that
Energy, invocation. That's so beautiful. Keep going. Wow.
right.
I've never
It's
heard
the
this.
prayer. See, dowry isn't always like an economic thing. It's
I
an
don't think it
energetic
should
thing.
be. That's very trans. It shouldn't be that. Anyways, continue. Yeah, yeah. I share that principle.
So the Gabriel told Adam that you have to, say that I'm coming to you in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most gracious, right? And so he came to her and he made love to her. And she's like, "Oh, what is this?" And he's like, "Sex." And she's like, "Oh, give me more of that."
Hmm.
Right. So innately, women have the capacity, and we know this, to really enjoy sex a lot.
Mm.
And then Allah gave Hawa modesty, right? And so then Gabriel was like, "Wait, so do you love Hawa?" He asked Adam. He says, "Yes." And Hawa goes, "Do you love him?" And she said, "No." And that's because of the modesty. She's already veiling her words
Wow.
to deny what she loves.
Mm.
Okay. But indeed, she loved him 9 times more than he loved her.
Mm.
And when they, disobeyed God, they chose to do that together, and he punished them together.
Mm.
And so that's how they came to earth out of the garden, right? So, all this biblical or whatever other versions of that story are out in the world. That's not the Islamic filter,
Mm.
right? That women are the sweetness of life. And every individual is accountable for what they choose to do. And women can choose to give you all of their love, or they can choose to keep it to themselves.
That's the beauty of the work, is it's showing the personal responsibility and the empowerment. You have a choice, right? That's where intention and choice go hand in hand. And it's interesting. I think we may have talked about this. Then there's the other version that many people don't know. It's more of an occult mysticism of the Lilith, the first wife. I think we've talked about this, and the notion of the shadow feminine, that allegedly he had a first wife named Lilith, who then he rejected, and then that Lilith was paganized as a demon eventually. So that's the allegory of the shadow side of sensuality, or the shadow feminine. So that's advanced shadow work. For those that don't know, it's you have a light, you have a mat, you have a dark within us. We have everything within us, the night and the day. And we have the woman and the masculine, the feminine and the masculine with us. So you also have the masculine shadow, and you have the feminine shadow from advanced shadow work. So it's interesting, yeah, because there's so many different archetypes for this. And it says the same thing, which is remove the veil in the way of your loving, remove the veil in the way of your, go from pleasure, as you said very beautifully, the pleasure as the shadow of joy, and step into full joy, full presence, full bliss. So yeah, it's really good that you brought that up. Interesting. Do you want to go into the this notion of, I joked with you about the Chris Rock, he has this stand up that he says, before 9/11, being black was the worst in America. And then after 9/11, Muslims became the new blacks. And here you are, you weren't naturally, raised Muslim, you raised African-American, and you translate that and you add. Do you want to talk about it all? Does it resonate today? We can maybe bring you back to talk about this hot topic: diversity, inclusion, racism, bias as to race and culture. So, I'm technically.
I think I'm complete for today. I think that's really a separate issue, and I wouldn't want to mix and match.
Cool.
One of the topics that I speak on is sexual assumptions of Black women in the workplace, and I want to be erring on the side of caution, not to talk about sex and spirituality and then talk about
Let's do that.
race.
Beautiful.
So,
We'll do that. We'll bring you back, maybe season 3, or maybe in this season. There will be more in this. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of how do you want to be remembered? How does what you do now tie to your legacy, to kind of wind down and kind of close out? How do you want to be remembered when you leave, in terms of both the impression you leave on the planet, your work, your vision, etc.? To kind of wrap up, anything you want to say on those things, please.
Yeah. I'd like to be remembered as the person who invited you to open yourself to the power of your emotions, and allowing that opening of your heart to plant seeds to your growth.
Openness, growth, and seeds. If you were to leave any parting words, inspired quote, or anything like that, anything to offer the audience?
I guess just to build off of that, right? So your thoughts can be the seeds to your growth, or the bars to your prison.
So the seeds can be the thoughts.
Yeah.
Or they can be the bars. I like that. I literally said something like that 2-3 days ago. You really are cut from the same soul. I like that. When I say soul siblings, there's certain people we connect. So beautiful. Anything else? You feel good?
I feel joy.
You feel joy. That was a trick, and you got it. Good. Let's wrap up on that point. There's this notion of, how do you feel? I feel good. Good's not a feeling. Cordelia mentions this spectrum, this wheel of emotion. That's emotional bypass. And as she wants to be remembered by opening to the power of your emotions, how you can use them and your thoughts as well as seeds for growth, and not to be imprisoned by yourself. Seeds to consider. So thank you, Cordelia, for being here. Thank you for being a joy in my life and the lives of those that you serve, and the lives of those that will meet you now through this episode. And thanks to each of you for being here, for indulging in this new information, if it's new for you, or if it's something you've been considering, if you want to dive deeper into it. As always, the goal is to inspire you, encourage you. And if you like what you hear, share it. Because when you do that, you share Cordelia and Mai's mission. Our mission is a collective mission, one to bring the whole world up, or as I say, together we rise. So that's the best way you can share the love. If you want to find out more about Cordelia, check out the comments below, subscribe if you haven't, and reach out. And we thank you today for inviting in more joy, more pleasure, because it will make you a more present, powerful, and quite frankly, enjoyable leader to be around. As always, I'm Haas, and this was a soul sister, Cordelia. Have a blessed day, and thank you for now.